First, let me apologize for not speaking in Hindi. देखिए, मेरी मातृभाषा हिंदी है और मैं 52 साल से अंग्रेजी में लिख रहा हूँ और आदत पड़ गई है, क्योंकि हमारे मुल्क में 25 विशेष लैंग्वेजेस हैं और अगर हम लोग एक ही ज़बान है जिसमें कि हम लोग सब एक दूसरे के साथ बात कर सकते हैं, वो है अंग्रेज़ी। और सच है कि हिंदी की ऑडियंस बहुत बड़ी है हिंदी अंग्रेज़ी से, पर मुझे उम्मीद है कि जो भी हमें कहना है यहाँ या कहीं भी, ये पूरे कोने हिंदुस्तान के कोने कोने तक पहुँचे। So excuse me, I'm going to speak in English for my own sake, as well as I think for the larger reach that one wants to have. We are in a moment of, I would say, terminal crisis for Indian democracy. Terminal because for the first time in this election, you have a confrontation between one party or group or movement, if you like, which is a part of the old India, pluralistic, secular in a loose and comfortable kind of way, and willing to live with each other's differences and to tolerate each other's whims and fancies. On the other side, you have a party which is monolithic, which wants to change the very nature of India completely, and which is relentlessly has been doing so for the last 5 years. On the surface, you would not, this is not apparent how serious the danger is. We have, after all, had 17 general elections in 67 years, and never has the selection or the result of the general election been challenged. But this appearance is deceptive. For here, this second party is very much like Muhammad Morsi's Islamic Party in Egypt. Its purpose in coming to power is to ensure that it stays in power. And it is prepared, we have seen over the last 5 years, to do anything to stay in power. And the muzzling of the press is only one small part, the important part, but a small part of the centralization of power and the creation of a monolithic state that they are after. Narendra Modi has no intention whatever of relinquishing power this year. For him, defeat is not an option in the polls. In his first speeches as Prime Minister, he spoke in 2014, he spoke grandly about his plans for the next 10 years. And the plans were simple. He was going to revive economic growth and create 10 million new jobs a year, and to embark upon a religious and cultural revival of the country. And the religious and cultural revival would be of Hindutva leading to Hindu Rashtra. In the last 5 years, he has been an utter failure in the first objective. मैं जरा खड़े होकर बात करूँगा, ये बहुत awkward है. Is this working? Hello? Yes. This is much better. I can see all of you. He has been an utter failure. Industrial growth has stagnated. The number of jobs in industry is now 11 million less than they were 5 years ago. 1 million small and medium-sized industrial units have closed down. Agriculture is in the most terrible crisis it has ever known. Huge parts of fertile land in southern UP, for example, are now lying barren because the farmer cannot take the risk any longer of paying the upfront costs. 42% of our land is tilled by tenant farmers who have to pay a rent first. The farmers cannot take the risk of paying the rent and meeting the cost of inputs, lest the crop fail. And so they prefer now not to take the risk. Rather than take the risk, go into debt and commit suicide. So the crisis in construction industry is completely dead. So what is left for Mr. Modi is the other half, which is the sensitization of Hindutva and the creation of a new Hindu Rashtra, which is systematically being done in a series of ways. And for that, he is changing the whole of the structure of India itself. I want to tell you just what's been happening in a sort of a point fashion, and I hope that we will be able to discuss this much more later on. The first thing that happened when Mr. Modi came to power was there's been a centralization of power in the Prime Minister's office. You know that Mr. Modi has not taken a single press conference. What is not so well known is also that he has not had a single National Development Commission meeting. This is a country of 30, 31, 35 states, I can't remember the number now, and the NDC had become, ever since the end of Congress dominance, the National Development Council had become the center, the place where all policy making was done through consensus for an India based on democracy and consensus. There has not been one National Development Council meeting, and what is more, in January 2015, Mr. Modi suggested that the National Development Council should be closed altogether. It should be wound up. Fortunately, the states objected and that didn't happen. As media people, you know that your access to people in government has been severely restricted. CCTV cameras have gone up in the ministries. You have to sign in. The PIB card, which had so much value before, has lost nearly all of it. You are watched in more senses than one. The officers who talk to you are watched. And therefore, suddenly, as I know from 50 years of experience, the flow of information from inside government has completely dried up. Now, what is left is the propaganda of the government. And then you have the pressure on the media, publish or perish, literally perish, as we just heard. And so what we have been getting now is this tremendous flow of government propaganda, which nobody believes, but there is at the same time no alternative story to believe. So where have people begun to go? They have begun to go to online television, online journals, and particularly you've seen in Hindi the colossal explosion, and I'm sure it's true of the other languages also, the colossal explosion of readership and viewership in the social media, online I call it. I won't call it social media. It's got a bad reputation for me. Modi has also, this government has shown its intentions of centralization and elimination of dissent in a variety of other ways. One is the calculated silence. You have Love Jihad, Ghar Wapasi, Gau Raksha, Romeo, every kind of campaign being run by vigilantes, of whom there are now tens of thousands in the country who have been given the power of life, death, and robbery from the people. And those vigilantes now effectively rule the countryside. And not a single person has been actually, as in 5 years, convicted of anything done under the aegis of these acts. There have been a large number of arrests followed by immediate bail, out you go, and then there is no further action by the police. That is the way they've been doing it. What Modi does is, he could discourage this. He could discourage the killing of people, or the beating up of cattle traders, people Dalits skinning dead cattle, all that, and the blackmail that has gone with it. Because these people are, for every one person who's been killed, there have been 1,000 people who have been blackmailed. Paise do, then we'll let you go. And that has continued throughout the country. One result of this, of course, is that the poor have become very much poorer. The collapse of the cattle market There are only two forms of capital in which the poor keep their savings. One is the jewelry of their women, and the other is their cattle. If you don't have the right to sell your cattle when, say, there's sickness in the family, then you have to sell your land. And the cattle markets have collapsed. So this is something that nowhere we will just not get the faintest idea of in the towns. But if you go to the villages, it's very apparent, and there are many articles being written, but they are online on all this. The second thing is, you've seen the assault on the opposition. You all know about the assault on Aam Aadmi Party. I would like to also tell you that it has failed signally, because as some of you know, there was a poll about 10 days or 2 weeks ago carried out with 18,750 people who participated, who were polled in it, which showed that the Aam Aadmi Party still holds 52% of the vote in Delhi. BJP is 36% and the Congress is 5%. So that has failed. But you know exactly how far they went. They have knocked out, effectively tried to knock out two articles of the Constitution, and the Supreme Court had to come in to reinstate them. Delhi state was reduced to the same condition as the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. That had to be reversed. And 15 Aam Aadmi Party people were indicted for various things, for alleged crimes, etc. Now, then the misuse of the CBI to intimidate opposition has been used mainly in Andhra and in West Bengal. Again, all of you are journalists, most of you know the details, but Bengal is a very good example of this, because in 2014 the CBI arrested two TMC MPs and the sports minister, and the West Bengal Director General of Police was arrested by the CBI for allegedly being involved in chit fund scams. 30 months later, 12 TMC MLAs were also indicted by the CBI. FIRs were written for accepting cash in some kind of a sting operation, which is probably also done by the ruling party. This is two states, but throughout the country, extensive use of suo motu power of arrest and detention of the police to intimidate opponents of the BJP have been used throughout the country. One very important thing I want to point out, which is the unwritten convention of Indian democracy. All of you know that there is no legal way of raising money to fight an election. So everyone who fights an election today has actually broken the law to raise the money somewhere or the other. By convention, political parties did not use this knowledge against each other. Modi's broken that rule. He's been using this systematically against the opponents. And one after the other, people have been indicted for this. And this again is the West Bengal case is a key example. Now there's a danger here. If the BJP comes back, you may not have to wait for the BJP to try and create a monolithic state. India has always been a kind of a federalism because of its language diversity, its religious diversity, its cultural diversity. And that is enshrined today in our linguistic states. 3 states have already given the warning to the center that you carry on like this and we will just simply ignore you and go our own way. Which are the 3? Bengal, Andhra and Chhattisgarh. All of them have withdrawn the permission given to the CBI and central investigative agencies to investigate cases in their states without prior specific permission. That has been withdrawn. It was withdrawn in November in Andhra and Bengal, and in Chhattisgarh in January. If 3 have gone and if this continues, how long will it be before other states, particularly in the south, withdraw this permission? what were that to happen, immediately the power of the center over this, to rule the state as one, the country as one, would disappear, because you, for any kind of coercive action, you need the forces of the law and order machinery. If the law and order machinery is gone against you in that state, you've lost control of that state. You're only left with the army. Are you going to turn the army against a rebelling state? Can any government in Delhi do that? Considering that a large part of the army comes from that state? It's impossible. The army is said categorically over and over again to the central government on various crises, don't use us against civilians, otherwise we'll be finished. And therefore, this is one thing that we have to realize. If the police versus police, conflict we saw in Bengal is only the beginning of the breakup of India. If the attempt is continued to centralize India in the way that we have done it in the last 5 years, in 5 more years, there may not be a united India anymore. Now, these are finally, there's one last thing that Mr. Modi has done. Because the economy has gone down the drain, he knows that if there's opposition unity, even partial unity, there is very little chance of the BJP getting a majority. In fact, they may not even emerge as the largest single party if there is a strong enough Gathbandhan. Reason why? Because last time they got 282 seats with 31% of the vote, whereas the only other time their parties got 282 seats has been the Congress in 1967, but they had 40.7% of the vote. So with 10% of the votes to have got the same number of seats is already a major achievement, and one that is very difficult to replicate. Since then, in every area, the failure of government, particularly economic, and the social conflicts they've set up, is almost certain to bring down the share of the vote. The only way they can keep it up is through relentlessly pushing the Hindutva agenda, which is what they're trying to do. But there is a great deal of also evidence, if you look for the last last 20 years of central state elections, as I have done, that this doesn't work very far. It worked in UP in 2017 only because the SP and the BSP fought each other. But the SP and BSP together got 6% more of the vote in 2017 than the BJP did. So really, what will decide the elections is that even partial coalitions will bring the BJP way down from 282 to less than 200. Now, knowing that, excuse me a moment, I just want to see something else. Modi's, it is against this that you must see what's happened in Pulwama. If you give me 2 minutes more, I want to finish. But this is important to tell you. I wrote a piece in the Wire last week in which I said that the entire India-Pakistan thing was pure theatre, because it is impossible for the Indian Air Force to target 4 targets and actually, as it turned out, not kill a single human being, unless it is done deliberately. And I've described in great detail the theatre that was done, the agreement that was worked out between India and Pakistan to show that we are doing something to each other, etc., possibly with American help or American insistence to do that. But one very important thing is, why did Pulwama happen? All of you know that there were in fact 3 warnings from the IB, and there was a warning from the Kashmir State Police about the Pulwama, that something serious, very big was being planned by the Jaish-e-Mohammed. What we don't know, and what the government knew, and what I found out only very recently, 2 or 3 days ago, was that the government knew for a very long time, because the Pakistan government got to know that something was being planned in Pulwama on the 7th of February, 1 week before it happened. Instead of warning us or anything, what they did was, they said to be prepared for a possible immediate reaction. They moved their forces to forward locations, to battle stations, forward airfields, forward bunkers. All these were activated. All of this we saw, our people saw. We have very good intelligence on their side, as they do in India. and it was all reported to the government. That was what the 3 IB warnings were all about. In fact, actually, IB warnings, apart from that, there were, I'm sure, also military intelligence warnings on this. Because what I'm telling you now from military sources. They found this out, that this is good, there's something going to happen, to the point where the CRPF asked to be airlifted. And the Ministry of Home Affairs denied that request. Then they went in convoy, the 49 people were killed, and 5 days later that request was granted. Now, if you know, if you have so much information on the seriousness of something that's about to happen, and the CRPF is strongly of the opinion that it's going to be an attack on the convoy, because if you look at the history of 30 years in Kashmir, the most vulnerable point of the Indian security forces has always been the convoys on the roads. Hence, elaborate, things of methods of road opening parties and so on. And at one point in time, before they began to use electronic means, 150,000 CRPF men were deployed round the year in Kashmir, patrolling all the roads, line of sight, and I've seen them, but I've gone past them and talked to them also, line of sight off the roads from 5 a.m. in the morning till 10 at night. And then there would be, to make sure that no IEDs had been planted on the road. This was the kind of surveillance that was required. So they know that roads are the vulnerable place. As Afghanistan, they know. What is more, 3 days before the attack in Pulwama, the Jaish-e-Mohammed uploaded a film of an attack on a convoy on a road in Afghanistan and said, we're going to do something similar to this in Kashmir. All this is there. I've seen that video, and it was reported by, I think, the Kashmir correspondent of NDTV. Now, the point is, if all that is known, why was the thing refused? And there's only one reason I can think of. Mr. Narendra Modi wanted, I say this knowing exactly what I'm saying, was prepared to take the risk, possibly even wanted a major incident, which in this case led to 49 deaths, in order to create the opportunity for rousing patriotism in order to win the election. I'm going to stop there, because this is the interesting thing to me is that nobody, if I, sitting outside a newspaper, I'm able to get the detailed information of what the Pakistanis were doing and what they knew, then I'm sure it could have been done here. It's not been reported. This whole, people have raised this issue. How did they allow the government to go and do this, to allow the road convoy when there were 3 warnings from the IB and 1 from the Kashmir police? And then there's been no answers and it's been dropped. Well, it shouldn't be dropped. The answer is, I think, that this was a repeat of the opportunism that Modi showed when he used the Godhra train burning to catapult himself into power in Gujarat for the next 12 years. Thank you very much.